Right, so this is probably going to be a little bit confusing, but this is a pre-introduction to the actual introduction of the video. This video is basically how about this quad started to get rod knock after we'd used it a little bit, and it's the process of me stripping it down to fix it properly. But in the video I did mention that before we stripped it down properly, we did just try putting new big end bearing shells in it. We put new pistons in it, etc. And the rod knock noise was much better after we did that. But it was still there. So before we go into the video, right now, after I finish speaking, there's going to be a bit of a clip of how the engine sounded after the first minor rebuild we did. Hello! Right, so welcome back to another video. There's been quite some time since we've actually made a video, primarily because the chap who was filming and editing has stopped filming and editing. But this is the Arctic Cat 700 diesel. There are some older backlog videos that haven't gone up yet, but I don't know when they're going to go up, so I'm going to put this one up myself. Unfortunately, we had some quite major issues in that it started knocking. We had completely gone through it. We've done all the suspension joints, you can see all the ball joints are new, track rods are new, done wheel bearings on this side, done brake pads, brake fluid, changed all the diff oils, I changed the fuel filter, the oil, etc, coolant. And what else have we done to it? I'm sorry if I'm going over stuff, I probably am. We replaced the CB boots on the back, had the racks powder coated, put new grips on it, although they're a bit mucky now. Replaced the water pump, timing belt. Anyway, I'm getting off track. So we drove it for about 100 miles. Nothing too hardcore, but unfortunately it had something of a checkered past. Because it started knocking, so I disassembled this engine completely. I polished the crank with a bit of sandpaper. It wasn't the best job, but I just wanted it to last a little while. I put new pistons in it. I put new rings in it, obviously. I put a new head gasket in it. I put new rod bearings in it. But unfortunately it wasn't enough. I managed to stop it knocking a lot, but it was still making a noise. As you can see, that's the new rod bearing, which is in something of a state. If we look underneath at the crank, you won't be able to see very well, but that is quite badly damaged. Let's see if we've got a torch around here anywhere. No, I haven't, but I'll show you later on. That is completely knackered. So what we thought we'd do with it, I've spent so much money on this machine because this is my machine to keep. I love these 700 diesels. It's not going anywhere. This is my quad. So we're going to put turbo on it. We're going to completely build it. I don't know if I'll be able to put forged components in it. I don't know if they're available. I highly doubt it. We might be able to get them made. But at the very least, it'll have a new crank, it'll have new rods, it'll have new... It's already got new pistons, which should hopefully still be fine. It'll have new everything, basically. And then we're going to put a small turbo on it. I'm not quite sure what turbo we're going to put on it yet. I haven't looked in great detail. I know there's some smart car sort of 800cc diesel turbos, so we're going to have a look at that. But it's going to be absolutely spot on. The rest of it's fine. As I said before, we've gone through it completely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the rest of this bike. It's just the rod knock problem. So what we're going to do now is I've already got the lower oil pan off. I've got the upper oil pan off, which is over there. Unfortunately, you do have to cut the cross member out of the bottom to get the oil pans out. But there's a kit you can buy to make a boltable cross member. I wouldn't have cut it out because obviously I didn't realise I was going to have to take the engine out, but I did it just so we could replace them rod bearings without having to take the whole engine out. I think we can actually potentially drop the crank without removing the engine. Yeah, we should be able to. If we get the clutch cover off, or at least pull it back, we've got the connecting rod, or not connecting rod, the crankshaft support bearings there, there and there. so we should be able to remove the crank without actually removing the engine. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to remove that clutch, secondary clutch. I've already got most of the primary clutch off. That's not the secondary clutch, sorry, that's the back plate of the primary. There's the primary. I'm going to have to get the head off. Being as we're going to be placing the connecting rods, we need to get to the pistons. So the head's going to come off. Then I'll get the clutch cover off. So yeah, first of all, I'll remove all this out of the way. I've already got most of the plastic and etc. off, as you can see. This cover's just held on with Allen bolts, and I'll come back once the cover's off. Okay, so I've got that rocker cover off. That was obviously easy. I've also done some other bits and pieces. Remove these diesel lines for the fuel rail. Clamped a bolt in them, stop them leaking. I'm going to go quite quickly through what I'm doing because people don't like watching it necessarily, and otherwise it'll be a really long video. There's a top support you need to unbolt to get to the rocker cover, which I've already done. I forgot to mention that in the previous clip. Well, I've taken the timing belt off on the other side. There's the timing belt, which was new not very long ago. Literally all you do is undo this 17mm bolt, it releases your tensioner, and then you can literally just slide the belt off. Normally you'd set the timing to a certain degree. Oh, I can get that water pipe yet. I've also disconnected that from the thermostat housing. Normally you'd set the timing up at a certain angle. For God's sake, should have secured that more securely before I started doing this clip, shouldn't I? You would normally turn this to a certain angle that's ideal, but obviously my pistons are now disconnected, so that's slightly pointless. So the next step that we're going to do is remove the lift pump. There's your lift pump there. It's literally just 10mm bolt either side, two 10mm, and that just slides right off. Careful because you've got an O-ring in there that can go missing. Then you've got an injector, lift pump push rod in there, which you also need to pull out. Once I've done that, I will be removing these unit injectors. So you remove these four little tiny Allen head bolts, your fuel rail lifts off, then you turn your crank until each one of the injectors is completely pushed in. See how that's moving in, the push rod on the injector. So you do that till it's fully in, and then you get there's a special hardened tool you get to put in the top of this injector to keep it pushed in when you remove it. Otherwise you'll never put enough pressure to push it back in when you're reassembling. I haven't got the hardened tool, but by far the easiest thing to do is use a tiny little hardened drill bit. I've got some lying around here that I will use for that purpose. Here's one. So literally just slot it in. Okay, that's not quite fully extended, I'll have to do that in a minute, but literally just slot them in and it'll hold them in place. So I'm going to do that with the injectors, remove the fuel rail, remove the lift pump, then I'll be back. Alright, so I've done that. Lift pump's off. You can remove those fuel light hoses if you want to, it's not essential. As I say, the lift pump push rod is there, literally just push it and it'll slide out and you can pull it out. There it is, go in the box. I always put bolts for each section of the engine in different bottles, so this one is the bottom end bolts, so with all the sump bolts in it. That's top end with all the valve cover bolts, head bolts will go in there, etc, etc. That's body bolts for all the the plastics, footwork, things, etc. Where you can put them back in, such as in this bolt housing, put them back in, and for the fuel rails. I've just removed this shut off piece here. That's removed. There's a spring as well that goes on the unit injector onto that rail. Next step now, I've got the injectors shut off, as you can see. I'll need to remove this whole assembly here with the lifters on for the valves. So I'll take that out now, just these three 17mm bolts, and that'll lift off. Once you remove this, you need to get a rubber band and put it all over it, because there's nothing holding all these components on. They'll just slide off the rail if you don't put a rubber band around them. Once I've done that, I'll remove the unit injectors. So again, two 14s on either one, they'll just pull straight out. I'll remove the dipstick from the thermostat housing. I need to remove this bolt here. This is an upper engine mount. That's a 10mm bolt, so I bolt that from the head. I've taken the throttle cable off. That was just 10mm locking nut and then unscrews from here. So yeah, once I've got all the injectors out, and all the rockers, etc. I'll then remove the exhaust. So you've got two 13 mils there, and then 10 mils holding the downpipe or header on, whatever you want to call it. So I'll come back once I'm remove the head. Right, so it's a couple of days later now. I did get quite carried away with the disassembly, so I sort of forgot to film most of it, so apologies for that. But as you can see, the head's now off, all the clutches are off, etc, etc, etc. I did watch the footage back that I'd done before, and as you can see, there's all my new gaskets that have done less than an hour's work. Hopefully they'll be alright, except from the crushable ones, because they were really quite expensive. That's all the rockers. As you see, you need to put a band around them, else I'll just fall off the steel tube in the middle. There's my unit injectors that I was talking about before, with a hardened drill bit holding them in the pushed-in position. Here's my brand new pistons that again have done less than an hour's work. They are still perfectly usable. There's ever so slight touch marks on the top, which I can only imagine from the valves. This one's particularly bad, this little bit here. There's nothing's going to affect them, but makes me wonder what actually caused that. I can only imagine the rods are ever so slightly tweaked out of straight, if you know what I mean. But I'm going to have to buy new rods anyway, because I'm going to get oversized bearings. Well, I probably wouldn't have to use different rods, they're probably the same, but I'll get them anyway because I'm going to all this trouble. All the clutches are off, as I said. The back one, secondary clutch, literally just one bolt to take it off, or a nut as I should say, and it pulls off a keyway, so you don't need a special puller for that. This is the back plate to your primary, which I showed you in the previous episode. You do need a special tool for that, which I've got here somewhere. Here it is. I'm not sure if there's got a part number on it. There's your part number. It will fit most Polaris and Arctic cats. And that literally just screws into your crank, or into your primary clutch like so, and pushes on your crank to pull it off. You do need this tool. You'll never get that primary clutch backplate off without it. And once you've got the primary backplate off, you then need to remove the flywheel, which is there. That's literally just 5 nuts. They can frequently come loose and cause the same sort of rod knocky rattle, but they're absolutely fine in my case. To get this casing off, literally just T45 torque bits all around it, and the casing pulls off enough to drop the crank. As I mentioned previously, you've got 3 blocks holding the crank off. They just all drop down, and you've got a plate ground here with a gasket that you'll need to replace. You need to remove. Going around the other side, you need to take the alternator bracket off, an alternator, and if you see down there, I've got the same sort of situation, a plate that you need to move on each side of the engine. In this case, that's actually the oil pump, which is here. So my oil pump is removed. That's in good condition. So yeah, really it's just a case of getting the crank sorted out. I've taken the crank to a local machine shop, and they reckon I've got about 10 thou to play with. But there's hardly any actual scoring on it, so I should be fine, they think, with 0.5mm oversized bearings. Here's my head. Very little damage, as you can see. My camshaft, it's absolutely mint. There's barely a mark on there. That sort of reflection is just oil, as you can see. So that's a good sign. If I flip her up, you can see the valves are also in good condition. I'd say these valves have been replaced before. I think the original pistons I took out were very bad. I think it's previously broke a timing belt and had a head rebuild. See, I'm scratching up my brand new freshly powder coated racks. That's not very handy. Here's my head gasket, which I've just paid £80 for, but I'll have to bloody replace because it's a crushed gasket. That's a right pain. I've got my brand new seat foam arrived for it. I'll make the seat nice and new when I take it down to the upholstery shop. So yeah, this is about the end of this video now. I imagine it's probably quite long. The next part of the video will be fitting the not brand new, but freshly machined crank and all the new bearings, etc. I'll have to replace, as I say, all the crank seals and gaskets here, as well as the shells for the upper part of the crankshaft supports. So yeah, please subscribe. We're damn close to 1,000 subscribers now, and as soon as we get 1,000 subscribers, we'll be flooding it with the videos. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one.